organizing agendas, calendar invitations, and activities. We continue to meet weekly with the K2 teachers teams during the implementation phase. Each team member was responsible for bringing their notes for each group that they met within small groups from the previous week and progress monitoring trackers they used for the week to the meeting.
Okay, I was responsible for tracking trends from teacher to teacher in the same grade level and then from grade level to grade level. We also reviewed progress monitoring tools and we used those by quintile to inform our reteach blocks. So we would take those progress monitoring tools and use it to see where do we need to reteach kids. From those plans and those anecdotal notes, we were able to, well, we hope that we can use that as evidence to be able to make sure that we're meeting equity for all students.
I took all of that data, I took all of those trends and just kind of put them on an easy to read graph, especially using like some documents and some Excel. I was able to really be able to show like us as the committee, but also as the teachers to see like where are we succeeding, where are areas of growth, and how we line up with like other campuses in the nation that are like us.
Mm-hmm. I was actually responsible for also analyzing the trends and kind of seeing where students were not progressing. And so kind of pointing out to teachers like, hey, this student has kind of been at the same skill, maybe we should try it a different way, offering some suggestions like that. And then also maybe even recommending RTI for, some students who are just not performing or not progressing. This was a good way for us to kind of catch those kids who may go unnoticed, who are just not making progress the way that they should. So with those graphs and the data that you collected, did you notice any trends or, I guess I really want to know, has our plan been successful, or like based on the data, what does it say?
Right, so basically, I think we're always going to celebrate those successes that we do have, and we did see some really good growth. But we were not super excited about the drop in our percentile scores, especially when it comes to MAP data, because MAP is just a little bit different than Saxon. We did not perform quite so well on that, and so we wanted to, I think we could say that it was quite successful when it comes to phonics instruction, and when it comes to like the general decoding of our, K2, but when it comes to MAP, there just requires a little bit more than Saxon can provide.
I would agree. So knowing that and allowing the data to inform our moves as the collaborative team, how could we best address our kind of, I don't want to say failure, but our shortcoming when we compared beginning of the year to middle of the year? What were some things that we could do to make our end of year better than the progress we saw before?
I would definitely say pushing the rigor of the kids. Even for me in my class, and what I kind of saw with the other teacher was that like once students were mastering skills, we just kind of like, oh, they got it, and that was it. So we didn't really push those Q5 kids who, like, yes, they we already knew they could do all of the decoding and they could do that before they got to me. But what do we do after that? Like, what should we do after they do these skills? So I guess just kind of putting something together where we can actually, like, we're tracking this. Okay, they got it. Okay, what do we do next? So like next steps for teachers and what they can do after we do know, yes, they got it. That's great. But what's next for those kids? Because we kind of just leave the kids just there, like, okay, they got it. But like what she said, with MAP, it's just more. It requires more than just, okay, they mastered this. They need all these other skills as well.
I would agree. So let's kind of open the floor a little bit to talk about what would that continuum look like. I mean, if we had the same continuum for K through second, because, we just came back from COVID, and so some of our second graders were still like performing at kindergarten level. So just if we were to develop this continuum, where would it start based on our Saxon materials, and then like where would it progress to? What do you think would be like a natural progression? Let's talk about that.
Well, in kinder, you would start right with that basic letters, sounds, But I think also what Saxon really hits well is the phonological awareness piece. We do a lot of that in kindergarten.
Make sure that we have turn and talks incorporated. That's a big thing for us. There are no turn and talks just already originally placed in the document or the script. So that's something that we had to make sure we're adding in. Also just planning for those misconceptions, like where there's a lot of questions that are asked in Saxon. So we're having to like make sure like, okay, what would kids say? There's also parts where it's like various responses. So like I like to write out, well, what could these various responses look like? What might, this group of kids say, or how can I scaffold the question so that it works for this group of kids, or so that every learner is able to like be successful.
That is huge. And I'm glad that you were able to take that charge and like lead teachers in doing that, because the script is kind of teacher student focused, but just like kind of a back and forth. So for you to kind of make it more dynamic and introduce ways to engage students overall is really helpful, just to make sure that the kids are focused and paying attention. And like you said, those check for understandings and scaffolding questions, I mean, those are really important. Even if you are like mid-year and you're noticing like maybe they're not able to do something, you can put that into your review. And so it was beneficial for you in the professional development to teach that to to teachers,
Yeah.
because it got them just in the mindset of like, we do want them to follow the script, but if there's an opportunity to do a turn and talk or to do a group activity really fast, they can annotate that and then be able to follow that in their lesson. So that was very helpful. Was this the first professional development that you've ever led?
It wasn't, but it did feel like that just because the information was new, the curriculum was new. So just having to present that, it was kind of, especially when teachers were not at ease about it. Like, I think teachers were excited because we had phonics, like a good phonics program, but we really didn't know what to expect with it. So it wasn't, I was nervous, but I also had practiced it, but it still was kind of like, okay, I have to make sure I do a really good job, because it's almost like I'm having to sell this to these teachers because I'm the person that's giving you kind of like, this is what it will look like. So that was kind of a big task, and I was nervous about that.
Well, how did being part of this collaborative group help you overcome those nerves?
Just I was able to like collaborate, and just being able to be a part of a group where I'm learning is what was very insightful, to gain different perspectives from the lessons, so from the curriculum.
Did you participate in any like practicing before or after your model lesson to help you
I
prepare?
did, and I actually have a second grader, so I kind of would do these lessons with her and just kind of get her used to them, to try to see like, okay, what is, especially like she was the same age as the kids that I would be using this with. So like, what kind of misconceptions would she have? So I was able to practice with her and not just like with a mirror or trying to do it. So it was helpful to have like an actual child who would be using Saxon phonics. That was great.
Yes. Thank you for that feedback. If you would have changed anything about your professional development, the 1 hour block that you did give to teachers, what would you change or how would you make it different?
I would have loved to do this in person rather than virtually. I just feel like there were certain parts of the lesson that I mean, you can tell this curriculum is not made for it to be virtual. It's definitely in person, very student engaged. Like it's for the kids to like engage with you. So like on Zoom, that can be kind of hard because I'm waiting for responses, but I gotta wait for kids to come off mute. But there's a lot of questions that like we need immediate response. So like that was tough for it to be virtual. Just the way the curriculum is written, it's not really written for virtual. So in person would have been like an opportunity. And then just, I mean, yes, I can hold up the cards and things on the screen, but that's just hard to view for some people. So I would have loved to just, and I'm a visual learner, but I'm also a tactile learner. So like I would have loved to touch the stuff or see the things. And so I think other teachers would have loved that as well.
Or I would completely agree with you. And there's just other things like print awareness and book concept and those things. So even though it was teachers, we were acting like they were students. So it would have been nice to have them in person. I agree with that.
Right.
Do you think that differentiated small group with Saxon phonics was beneficial for our students?
Oh, absolutely. I saw a lot of growth with my kids and just talking to my colleagues, they did as well, just from middle of the year map to or beginning of the year map to the middle of the year. I'm pretty confident that we'll see growth as well from the middle of the year to the end. So I'm really excited about that to see what that looks like for my kids. Um, I just think it was just for them being able to have a solid phonics curriculum was great for my kids. And then I also was happy to see the growth in kids who already could read, right? So they could read, but it was like, now I'm teaching you the why behind why you're reading these words the way you're reading them. So, like, where I expected, like, maybe this wouldn't have been beneficial for kids who already could read, it was extremely beneficial because even myself, I'm like, hey, I've been pronouncing this word wrong all my life. And so now that I'm coding this with a breathe, or I'm coding this, it's like, is the word really delicious? It's not. It's delicious, you know? So I was able to really like kind of take a step back and I'm learning the why because when I was little, I remember doing phonics, getting it, understanding it. I knew about vowels, but my teacher never told me the why behind why I was reading these words the way they were. So I think that's where we see the growth for kids is because they are understanding the why and we're able to break them into these smaller groups where we're able to differentiate it, even if it's diagrams, it's giving the kids like a pattern for why they're reading this like that. So even usually where kids struggle with the diphthongs and digraphs, they're not because they're learning a code for them.
It's almost like just recognizing the pattern. It's not so
Right,
scary and unfamiliar if you
right,
recognize the pattern. So
right,
yeah, I would agree. Coding does help them to do that and just to decode those words that look really scary or to
right,
understand why the sound is, the way that it is. So
for
last
sure.
question I would ask you, what would you like to see in the future or what advice would you give to teachers who are using Saxon phonics the same way next year?
In the future, I would say if it's already here, like I know a lot of times the materials are here, but they don't really give it to us when it's here and we're like begging for the materials. So I was like anxious to get my hands on things and a lot of other teachers were too. So like just giving us time to dig into the curriculum before it's like the week of, okay, tomorrow you're teaching Saxon. So I think in the future, I would love to have the materials early just so I can get familiar with it. Other teachers can get familiar with it because that would have been a big help versus, okay, it's week one is day one. Okay, you don't have to start Saxon until next week, but you're just getting the material versus if we got it, we have PD starting in July. I have these materials I can dig in on my own if I choose in the summer. So I think that's what I would like. If I had any advice to give teachers, it would definitely be to read the script in its entirety. Like there are some very important points that if you skip, you just lost the kids the next day, even lose yourself because like, hey, I didn't know that, and they're like, you're reading a script and it's telling you what to say. And it's like, yesterday you learned that, and you'd be like, and the kids will be like, no, we didn't. So it's like every piece. And a lot of times, even me, I was reading the red because it was like, okay, I knew the red is what I need to read. But the black print is also like very important. It's telling me what to do with kid decks. It's telling me how to play these games. It's just stuff that I was skipping over because it's like I was thinking time, time, time. But the way that they built this curriculum, like you can tell, like it takes about a solid hour to get through this curriculum for a reason. Because it has a lot of different pieces. So I would say make sure you are reading everything in the script. If you can even read it before, make sure you do that and not just picking the script up because you're going to miss a lot or you're going to realize like, hey, I didn't get it that time. So I would just say make sure you're reading, make sure you get your materials out beforehand because there are a lot of pieces to it. There's multiple card decks, it's picture cards, letter cards. It's just a lot of pieces. So you really do have to be organized and make sure. I mean, it's easy like once you're pulling out what like what my colleague showed when you put the things together, the bins together. But once it's in there, it's like, okay, it's there, you're pulling out. But those other pieces, you have to like keep them in there